Welcome to another episode of the Evolution Project podcast. And we're going to spend a little bit of time with my friend Devin Rappleye. Now, this is going to be an interesting conversation because Devin and I met, I want to say 3 to 4 years ago, introduced by a mutual friend, Randy Sparks. Sparks of Gratitude podcast, by the way. Fantastic. Shout out to Randy. He introduced us together and Devin came to an Evolution Project. And my first impression when I talked with Devin was I was so impressed with how much he cares. He's one of those people that just show up with his whole heart. And at the time, I didn't know what he actually did for a profession. I just remember thinking, this is clearly a guy that cares a lot about people. And before I know it, I come to find out that he's a chemical engineer, you guys. Not just a chemical engineer, he actually teaches at a local university that we may be able to disclose at some point today, but it's down south from Salt Lake. And he is a professor there and teaches students about chemical engineering. So what I thought was so interesting is I was like, wait a second, this guy's like a mad scientist, totally dealing with like theories and very complex things every day in his life. And yet, when I would talk to him, I found myself in these very like ethereal conversations about the heart. You know, Devin and I thought it would be really worthwhile to get on and do a podcast today speaking to the head and the heart. Because, you know, oftentimes at the Evolution Project, I'll say the journey from the head to the heart is 1,000 miles. And sometimes it even feels further than that. However, truly integrated individuals, we find that both serve a purpose and that the head and the heart are actually working for you together to bring about and manifest your life and like a higher version of your life. Your higher future self is calling you to. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Devin, hello, my friend.
Hello, Bryan. It's good to see you, my friend.
Yes. I love it. Devin and I randomly every once in a while, I'll get like a text message from Devin. And it's sometimes just so simple. It's like, hey, I was thinking of you, or I read this quote, or, you know, just something. And it just lights it up. And that's actually how this conversation started. Devin, you wanna lead everybody into why we're talking today and how it happened?
Yeah, so it was so interesting listening to your introduction. And I'm curious if maybe some of the listeners are already sort of like, what's this guy talking about? Like all this heart woo-woo stuff. Because if you would have met me 8 years ago, Bryan, we probably wouldn't have been friends. Because I wasn't the wholehearted individual I am today. I was very much all cerebral, like in my mind.
You'd been, but that kind of been your vocation, right? Like that
Yes.
was that would make sense. You went into a
So
very logical process-based
yeah.
profession.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, I started my first job at a big national lab, and I definitely felt this pressure to try and like prove myself or fit in, right? And so I leaned really hard into my intellectual, analytical, logical minded self. And honestly, a lot of my training throughout my profession, emphasizes this critical thinking, the scientific thinking. And I was living so much in my head. And the other element to that was I uh, am a recovering addict, 14 years sober and in recovery. And those first 4 to 5 years, I was just like, the way I'm going to recover is I'm just going to lock down my feelings, my heart. I'm just going to be calm, cool, collected. And that's how, because these feelings are what led me down this road to forming this addiction in the first place. That was where my headspace was at. And so I had this personal background, and then I had this external environment that was all sort of pushing me towards, hey, let's just be logical, collected. And so I sort of locked down my heart for a number of years.
Yeah. What was the result of that? Like what came from that? You know, like I mean,
Yeah.
I think probably people can identify. I mean, Devin, when I think about it, it's like, why would someone lock down their heart? And I think because sometimes it's easier to not feel.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, easier to not feel. It feels like you're more in control. So everything we do, and I love that you brought this up, we can judge it as like that past self as like, man, what were you doing, you idiot? Or you can look at that past self and be like, wow, that past self was carrying so much. And this was the best coping mechanism they could come up with at the time. And so no one's out there like, how can I like shrink myself? How can I live a very partial or incomplete life.
Yeah.
No one's like that. It's just we find that, oh, you know what? That 10 years ago, Devin, he was like, that seemed the clearest way to him to deal with what was happening, the environment around him, his own personal history. I cared very much about my marriage. I wanted to keep my marriage. And so I was like, oh, this is the best way for me to do it, is if I just sort of I didn't think of it this way, but I became a shell of myself.
Mhm.
And that was my armor. That was my protection. That was how I showed up in the world and started gaining trust and approval of others. And so it seemed to be working. And you know what? Maybe that was the right thing for Devin at that time. But there came a point where the 8 years ago, Devin started waking up and be like, I don't feel great. I feel hollow. I feel like the connection I'm having with others is sort of incomplete. And I started feeling a bit more miserable and I didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so,
So what did you do about it? I mean, because we didn't meet each other 8 years ago. That was before we knew each other.
no, it wasn't. At that time, my wife was leaning more into her heart space, and that was creating some tension in our marriage. And I had a good friend at that time. Shout out to Aaron Frazier. He came over.
Aaron Frazier,
And
thank you.
yes, he came over and we had a conversation, and this man has a gift. He has a gift of calling you out and calling you in at the same time. He basically told me like, "Devin, you're living completely up here in your head and you've blocked off your heart." And it was done in such with so much love and with so much care that I trusted him.
Yeah.
And he just basically took this, kicked down the door that had locked my heart and blew it open with our exchanges that we had over time. And so he became sort of this trusted guide for me back into my heart, back into my body.
Yeah. So that kind of started the journey home.
Yes. Yeah. And I kind of want to pause here because I can sort of feel my analytical side of myself being like, oh, this is total, like, what does it matter? What does it matter if we're in our heart? You know, what does it matter? And I just want to insert here for that part of myself and maybe anyone else who's listening is like, there is real research coming out that shows that we have more neurons than just in our brain. We have them in our gut, we have them in our heart, we have them throughout our body. Before I even was mentally aware that there was some neural activity, some intelligence going on in the rest of my body that I was closing myself off to, it was there, you know. It didn't matter whether my analytical mind, my logical mind was aware of it. It was nonetheless there, and I was ignoring the signals from my body, from my heart, from my gut.
You know something I think that one of my hopes and objectives of our conversation today as we lead more into this head and heart conversation is creating the space that it's like we're not trying to break down the role of the head. That's a very real part of everyone's life. I mean, and in large extent, it serves a great purpose, right? There are times where our logical brain will go, if you do this, most likely this is what's going to happen. We have a big track record on this thing. You probably should slow down a little bit, right? Whatever the thing might be, because it's out to protect us and keep us safe. And, and there are forces, there are things that are going on all the time. And whether we understand it or not, it's irrelevant. Think about thousands of years ago. We thought the earth was flat. We thought everything revolved around the earth, right? And that was a common belief that people thought, oh yeah, well, that's what it is. If you go that far, you'll just drop off in nowhere and things circle around us. And then all of a sudden, got turned on its head. The reality is the truth didn't change. We still revolved around the sun, but what changed was our perspective. What changed was now we've caught up to a place where we can, with science, start to explain what's actually really happening. And this is the story of everything. I mean, isn't that like, I bet you could tell me 10 different stories where we started out thinking this and it actually led to the polar opposite of what we started out thinking. And now we're like way down here. So Devin, what are some things that you've noticed in your own journey that you would be talking to the person that's listening to this that's maybe a little bit more in their head and that's how they've perceived and gone through their life? What are some things you talk to them about right now?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this leading up to this podcast on some of the blocks that I have run into and still run into today, right? And one of them's like, if I can't logically make sense of something, then it's not real or it's not useful. Like, what use would that be to me? It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one. I call it the logical truth block, right? If it doesn't add up in my mind, then it's nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit dangerous to hold on to too tightly to that, because I think as humans we naturally want things to make sense. We want things to add up. We crave certainty, right?
Yes.
And so when I venture into this territory of uncertainty, and this is important both in terms of like science and engineering and in terms of personal development, right? If we're trying to push the boundaries of knowledge, we have to find a way to be okay with the unknown, with the uncertain, and be willing to experiment with it. And this was something we talked about early on. Is like I said, I love that I get to experiment and measure what I'm doing with this heart work. And I remember you saying back to me, he's like, you can't measure this. I'm like, actually, I can. I have a tool, my body, my heart, I I get to sense and feel, and I get to see what effect is this having in me physiologically, emotionally, mentally, right?
Yeah.
So I think each one of us is blessed with this beautiful gift that allows us to sort of tap into not only just like the logical things that we can observe externally, but also the inner experiences we have and how we relate to them. And once I sort of opened my mind to that, like, it's okay if I experiment with something and it's like, oh, that didn't quite work. That actually made me feel worse. So I'm not going to do that anymore. Let's try this over here. Oh, that actually helped my stress come down. I could feel my heart rate come down. I could feel myself be a bit more calm, and I'm finding in life that I'm showing up better. I'm able to manage uncertainty a bit better. So that was an important thing that I've learned alongside you. How I love how you said it. Your body is a portal.
Yeah.
You get to see, you get access into additional knowledge and information. And it's not quite as straightforward as me saying something to you, words that come in through our mind and it's able to process a bit easier. It maybe takes a bit more time to unpack that. In fact, research has shown that feelings are about 8 times faster, processed 8 times faster in our mind than logical thought, than our rational thoughts, right?
Hmm.
So really taking the moment to pause, drop into my heart, breathe a little bit, gives me that time to catch up to these faster emotional thoughts. And they actually process through the brain. There's brain signals. So it's all interconnected, right? What I'm feeling in my gut and my heart, it all ends up coming up into the mind, into the brain, and processing there as well. And so it's all interconnected.
When we were at the Evolution Project, was there something that you experienced? You've been to multiple Evolution Projects, actually. Was there
Yeah.
something that you experienced at the Evolution Project that reinforced what you just shared? Where you were like, wait a second, I know I have now had this direct experience. I know where my frequency or where I was at with this. After this now, I directly feel this now. And it started to shift. That conversation started to move forward.
I don't know if I can point to a specific. There's been a lot of great experiences at the Evolution Project that have opened myself to myself, honestly. Probably the most vivid in my memory was the first Evolution Project that I went to. And we were doing a body scan and we were just, becoming more aware of all the different parts of our body and what we were feeling and sensing there. And I felt at some point in that body scan, like just how much I'm loved by my mom, by so many other people. And it just like poured into me in that moment. And like, again, like this is where words are going to struggle to capture this, right? And this is where living in the analytical mind sort of, it, it makes an incomplete life because there's things that we feel and experience that our rational mind can't really articulate, right? So, but I remember just feeling like, wow, that's how my mom feels about me. Wow, that's how my wife feels about me. And when I'm up here, my brain can be like, yeah, your wife loves you, but you're also still doing this and this and this. You're not always cleaning up after yourself. You're not always showing up in a calm and collected way. And if we don't get rid of those things, you could be abandoned. You could be left behind. It's like as a scientist and engineer, I've been trained in optimizing systems, right? And eventually, if I dwell too much in that critical thinking, analytical mind, I can come up with an endless list of ways I could optimize myself and my life. But then my life turns into a problem to be solved and not an experience to be lived.
Mhm.
So when I experienced that love, I knew that I was loved deep to my core And it didn't matter if I sometimes didn't clean up after myself. It didn't matter if sometimes I went off the rails. It didn't matter. I was loved by something and someone and somebody's. What that love that I felt was like, you'll always be loved. Maybe not by your wife, maybe not by your mom, but you'll always be loved.
Simple truths that when they hit and we feel it and we know, you're right. I think you said it really well. You said sometimes words are inadequate to describe what actually is going on. And I think that's part of this head and heart journey. What happens when words do not suffice? I know both of us, you speak Spanish, right?
No.
Oh, okay. You quoted a song a Disney song from like
Yeah.
Encanto one time, and I thought, oh, he speaks Spanish. So what I found is, do you speak another language?
Yeah. Lithuanian.
Oh, I bet you use that one all the time.
Every day.
Yeah. I remember when I came back, so I served a LDS mission in Spain for 2 years, and my parents, we were talking, and I made the comment to him. I said, "You know what's weird, you guys?" And they were like, "What?" And I said, "I genuinely feel like I can express myself better in there's more ways to express myself in Spanish to specifically identify like how I feel than in English because there's verbs that mean different things that say the same thing, but depending on how you use it, it means something different, right?" And this is all part of this expansion and contraction, which is really related a lot to our willingness and awareness. Like they're kind of all interconnected in this web called this journey we're on, right? This path of the head to the heart. What are some other things that you've noticed about things that maybe like get in the way of the head to the heart conversation? I know you just mentioned basically this concept of like logical truth versus an innate feeling.
Yeah. Inner
What is something
knowing.
that, yeah, that's right. What else?
Another thing that I've wrestled with is this idea that emotions are unreliable. And that is, if I, like I mentioned earlier, right? Like I felt like my feelings were sometimes out of control and that they were leading me down a road that I didn't want to go down, right? And if I gave in to my feelings, I would end up like completely lost or back in my addiction, or I would never know the truth if I allowed myself to feel my feelings. And I like this analogy of driving a bus. Let's say I'm driving a bus around town and I stop at different stops and different feelings can come on and different feelings can come off. And that's totally fine. Whatever that feeling might be, it can come on and it can come off. But I don't let those feelings drive the bus. I allow them to be. I allow myself to feel and acknowledge them. But as soon as I let that feeling drive the bus, I'm now no longer living an intentional life. I'm now just letting myself go wherever I feel pressured or pushed. And the interesting thing about that is I've mentioned that I allowed that to happen even when I was in my logical mind, right? My fear of not fitting in at this new big national lab as a scientist, that was driving me in a certain direction. I was letting that fear drive me away from my heart. And so in the very instance where I'm like leaning into logic, not trying to feel my feelings, the only thing that happens when I don't feel my feelings is they become stealth drivers, right? Like I no longer see them. And they're doing whatever. But if I allow myself to slow down and witness them and experiment, like, hey, what is this feeling? Just going back to science, that's huge. Observations are huge. Slowing down and taking the time to observe is vital to discovering new things. If I'm just blowing through things in the lab, I'll never take the time to like notice something new and be like, oh, that's interesting.
There's that Disney movie Inside Out, which does a great
Oh,
job of, making a great story around exactly what you're talking about. These inner voices, these feelings, these emotions that we feel. I love there's this one part where anger is like at this place where they're like, don't do it, don't do it. And anger's kind of like, you know what? Screw it. We're going all the way. Like I'm taking over the emotional board. I'm driving the bus right now. And we're going to go into full blast anger. And we don't even care what the
Mhm.
what the consequences are on the other side. I think everyone can identify with that. It's like we're at this point where we know there's enough consciousness where we're like, if I do this, most likely, based on experiences in the past, this is probably what's going to happen if I say this, if I act this way, right? Because it's like at some level, as humans, we are just patterns, like you brought up a really great thing. You're like, sometimes I don't clean up after myself, right? You're aware of it. you're aware of it, and there's times where you might be like, you know what, I'm not going to do it tonight. I've had a long day at work. I'm tired. I'll get to it tomorrow. I'm not going to do it. You consciously make that decision, right? To me, that's a really good sign that you're on a path of awareness, because you at least have the moment to go, I'm okay with not cleaning this up today, or I'm okay with what I'm about ready to say or to do because I know I'm doing it. Okay. And I just think that's such a powerful place. And I loved how you just talked about stealth drivers on the bus. So, like, the thought would be, I'm logically based, my emotions never hijack the bus. And then, like, that's exactly what your ego wants to tell you, because it's like, that's exactly right, Devin. You're in control. You're always driving the bus. Hey, by the way, don't let them think that you don't belong here. You better start overworking. You better start, taking on tasks that are going to make you look like you belong here. And then you're like, you're right. No emotion. It's like, what are you talking about, dude? That's a freaking emotion right there, driving the
Mhm,
bus, like you said.
mhm. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so well put. I love the analogy. It's very easy to see. Great distinction. Good job.
yeah,
That's good.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so that's at the other side of that, like you just mentioned, of like, don't let them know that you don't belong here, right? That's the other side of this emotion piece, at least for me, and maybe other analytically minded people, is if I allow myself to express and show my emotion, people aren't going to take me seriously. It's a credibility thing. Like, they'll be like,
Are you talking specifically like in your field? Or are you talking like, no, this is probably most people that are living in their head more, right?
I'm speaking from my direct experience. So it could be my field, it could be people outside my field that think that way,
Right.
right? But I feel and have experienced this regularly. And so I think it's more common in the science and engineering, but think I think it's anybody could think that, right?
Yeah.
So but yeah, that's a real fear sometimes. And as I've started to like what I really care about right now, Brian,
Mm-hmm.
is in our training, we are really good in the educational system at Broad in engineering and science and math. Like, we're really good at training them to be critical thinkers, find the problem, figure out how to solve it. But we don't do a good job of teaching them how to be human, of how to hold a compassionate space for themselves. In fact, there's been studies, big surveys coming out showing that people in STEM are 6 times more likely to experience depression and anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, let's pause
6
there for a
times.
second. Yeah, I was gonna say, let's pause that for a second, because the reality is I think as a whole, the standard deviation of everyone feeling a little bit more of overwhelm, anxiety, depression. I think the nature of the world we live in, especially over the last 5 years, I'm speaking for myself, but I think a lot of people feel this, is like, I've noticed myself feel more like that. This feeling of like, am I ever gonna catch up? This
Mhm.
feeling of like, like stories, that just pop up in your head, like uncertainty. Like, what is my profession going to be like in a year? How are my kids going to figure it out? How am I going to adjust to inflation? Whatever these things are, right? The ground we've been walking on absolutely has been shifted significantly over the last 5 years. So I'd say what's even more interesting to me is not only is it 6 times more likely, I think we're further than we were 10, 15 years ago, personally. So, I mean, it's more expansive than people realize. I don't have a science test to prove that, but that's just my intuition when I observe what I observe. So,
Well, what you've observed has been confirmed through surveys in the STEM field. So at least in the STEM field, we are recognizing and seeing that there is a growing number of students and early career scientists and engineers who are struggling with depression, anxiety, imposter syndrome. And they've done side-by-side surveys to show that non-STEM students definitely have a lower rate than STEM students.
so STEM, could you explain what STEM is really quick, just so
Oh,
somebody on there?
yes. Science, technology, engineering, and math. So those 4
So someone
categories
that's
of
more likely to be in a logical head, that those are very science based, 1 + 1 = 2 kind of
right,
professions, correct?
right. And interestingly, like I was drawn to science and engineering for 2 things. I was curious and I loved the certainty it provided. And isn't that an interesting paradox, right?
Yeah. because Because what it's
Be-
proven to be is
As I leaned in, I felt that polarity. I leaned more towards the certainty. And you know what that shut down? My curiosity. Because if I'm really truly curious and I have a feeling come up or I have an experience in my life, am I going to pause to notice that? Am I going to take the time to be curious about, wow, what's going on in me?
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, externally, if something goes wrong, if I'm getting something wrong and I'm leaning into that certainty, am I going to be more curious and start asking around, or even like sharing, like, hey, I got this scientific result. I got this result in the lab and I have no clue how to make sense of this, but I'm really curious to understand why it's doing that. But if I'm leaning into certainty, right,
Yeah.
I will not show that curiosity, right?
Or just mark it up as an anomaly and move on, right?
Anomaly, right? Yeah, anomalies are actually where a lot of innovation happens.
Of course. Of course. Because that's where curiosity
Yeah,
has to live.
yeah.
Devin, I love that. Will you give me that quote about the paradox that you shared this morning? That was
Uh,
fantastic. I don't know if you know it off the top of your head, but
yeah,
I loved
yes,
it so much.
yeah. The curious paradox of life is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change.
Oh
And
man.
this is what I've learned and experienced is like there's so many different paradoxes, contraries, polarities, whatever you want to call them. Just this,
Mhm.
and we're constantly trying to navigate this tension between the two of them.
Yeah.
And so let's say you look at what I just said about STEM students being 6 times more likely to experience depression and anxiety. Maybe you go, oh, well, the way to get rid of that tension is just stop educating people in critical thinking. Stop having them do STEM, right? But a lot like this very conversation is happening. The listeners are hearing this in their ears because of all the technological advances we've done.
That's right.
So there's huge benefits from a STEM education. And I don't want to downplay that.
Well, innovation doesn't live in a box. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, right? Like you can't go to someone and say, be curious and innovate, and then say, and live in certainty and security, right? That's what you just said. That's the paradox.
Right.
So you know what I find interesting? You know, this is something that I'm trying to do better, and I've actually tried to do in this conversation. It's like, can two things be true at the same time and coexist in the same space? And can we have the openness, curiosity, awareness that when we enter into that, we can say, all right, what is present right now? I don't know if there's anything you want to share or expand on that, but I
Yeah.
just feel
I was thinking the exact same thing. It's so easy sometimes to get in this either or mindset. It's like I either need to be curious or certain. But it's like, no, I need to figure out how to navigate that tension. I need to figure out how to be curious and certain. Because the truth is, if I'm just fully curious, I'm never going to feel certain enough to then like try an experiment, right? I'm never going to be
yeah,
like, I feel certain enough about this to like invest a couple days of my life into testing it, right?
yeah.
So I got to be certain enough about this hypothesis, this theory that I have that grew out of my curiosity. But I'm also never going to have a hypothesis or new theory to test if I'm not curious. And so that's sort of how it has to be. You have to figure out where do I find that balance within the tension?
So you said something that I don't want to skip over because our time is obviously running shorter, and I don't want to miss this. Okay. Devin, you called me 2 months ago. This is during the time you just blew your knee out, which was a bummer, right? I mean, so many fronts, right? You tear your meniscus, you got to get surgery. And we were doing a backpacking trip. We would have gone on 2 weeks ago. And we were planning on doing a backpack trip this year. And it's like, hey, we're probably going to put that on hold right now. By the way, I'm genuinely looking forward to it next year. Okay. Or maybe even later this year. Who knows? And you say to me, Bryan, I have been touching this with the science community where I have started to kind of implement a little bit of these thoughts that are maybe more heart conversation thoughts. And so far, it's actually been pretty well received. I'm just kind of observing as I put these things out there. And turns out I'm not the only person that's seeing, thinking, feeling these things in this community. And you said something that I want you to know, dude, in my bones, I believe so much that you are on to something. And I'm so excited to see where this goes. You say to me, Bryan, I think I'm going to do a class and I'm going to teach it this summer and I'm going to put the curriculum together and it's going to be about enter Devin. Tell everyone. I think this is exciting, dude.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I'm currently teaching a class on science and spirituality. And
Yeah.
I'm like, listeners, don't tune out now. Like lots of meaning has been assigned to the word spirituality. And really, what I'm saying about spirituality is this sense of wholeness, of being a part of something so much bigger than yourself. And I feel like people have those experiences in nature or wherever. I know that I've had them. And this is actually where I'm going with this STEM thing about, 6 times the depression and anxiety. It's like I feel like the pendulum has swung too far in their education, that they're being taught to be critical and analytical minded, and they're excelling at it so much. And what personally happened for me is that I didn't have enough counterbalance in my education, that over time, eventually I began turning my mind on myself.
Yeah.
It's just constantly finding ways. Okay, here's the new problem. Here's the way we can solve it. If you just do this, then your family will love you more. Then you'll be more accepted. Then you'll belong better. And on and on and on it went. And
It's like
so,
the bots took over your mind, and it just started to be
yes,
everything in your life.
yes. And I'll share this one quick memory. I planned this amazing vacation to the Redwoods in Northern California. That to me, like, if heaven existed on earth, that would be it right there. And I got my family all there. I figured out all the logistics, and we're standing in this gorgeous redwood grove. And I'm standing there watching my family, and I just have this deep depressive feeling come over me. And this thought comes into my head: it'd be better if you weren't here with them. Because earlier I had made some mistakes, or what I identified, my analytical mind had made a mistake, had identified as a mistake, right? And so it had already, in the background, it was kicking in and being like, oh, yeah, if you weren't here, then you wouldn't be upsetting your family, you wouldn't be upsetting your kids, right? But if I wasn't there, we wouldn't be there in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't have this capacity that I have now to create a compassionate space to say to that thought, thank you for that, but I'm going to stay here and enjoy and be present with my family. I let it hook me, and take me in. And so my hope with this class, and I hope what grows out of it and going forward into my career, is that I can offer some little bit of training to the students and others in my field and just anyone in my sphere of influence. How can we shift to a greater balance between our head and heart so that when we need to, we can sink more into our heart and experience this expansive, compassionate space when we're struggling? And then when we need to, we can draw more up into our heads and solve some serious problems and improve the quality of life for humanity.
Yeah.
And that's my hope, is to create a generation of scientists and engineers who are so emotionally resilient, mentally strong, and so engaged in their lives that their creativity just becomes boundless. And I love this quote from Einstein. He says, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." So how can I create spaces where people can have a moment to maybe lean a bit more into that intuitive mind, into their heart, and less into their rationality?
And what could be created in that space? Like, I mean, I feel like you blow the top right off, you know? You know what I think about? I think about children. I think about children when you're talking about this. I have a little 6-year-old. Anders, I call him my little Buddha. You know that. He's my inner child's best friend. And I love going on bike rides and hanging out at the pond and whatever we do, right? And one of the things I've noticed is his mind is always on, but he's so joyful. He has not been corrupted by the world too badly, where he's sitting there and he'll just start singing a song. Sometimes he'll just make up songs. He doesn't know the words anymore, and he's like humming along with it, or he'll just fill in the blanks. And he's just going like this all the time. And if I say, hey, let's go on a bike ride, in his mind, he just lights up. Let's go on a bike ride. I'm going to go get my backpack ready. I'm going to go get a water bottle. I'm going to go get a snack for us. I'm going to get my stuff that we can get the guppies out of the pond. Should I bring my bucket? Should I bring a jar? And before I know it, I'm like, I'll be right there. 2 minutes later, he's back. He's got it all ready. We ready to go? We ready to go? We ready? I got my helmet, And I just thought there is something, when Jesus said we need to be like children, there's something there. And what happens is we go through life, this curiosity. What do they say? The first 7 to 10 years of our life, we're building identity of who we think we are. And then we're spending the rest of our life trying to undo and get back to that fertile soil of, dude, you already are enough. You already are amazing. You already are. You are. I am.
Mm,
And it's the great it's the great deconstruction for the ultimate reconstruction, you know?
mm,
And Devin, one of the things that I can say is being your friend, walking the journey alongside you, especially over the last 4 years as we become better friends. I just want you to know, man, like I love where your heart's at. I love how you have found a pathway where your head and your heart are working together and beautiful things are coming from it. And, that which is most private is most universal, Devin. And I'm willing to bet that you might be onto something right now. And I just want to let you know that I applaud you, I cheer for you, and I'm grateful for you.
yeah.
Do you
Thank you,
have
Bryan.
any? Yeah, dude.
Thank you.
Receive that, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate that story about Anders, because like that's exactly what I'm trying to do with the students. I feel that I came into was drawn to STEM education just from this wide-eyed, wild curiosity of like, what? We can do this? We could possibly do that? Just think about all the things that could happen if we just figure this out in with the science and the engineering and the math and all these things. If we can just pull this all together, what could we do? It seemed endless to me.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the education pathway, we start preserving, protecting, hiding, shielding this wide-eyed, wild curiosity. At least I did. And my hope is maybe I can start creating some spaces where I can return these students to that part of themselves where they're just exploding with curiosity and creativity again.
Childlike wonder. Devin, well, you are doing it and you will continue to do it. I know that we have a class that you invited me to come
Yes.
in at. And I just want you to know, dude, like I'm beyond jacked. My mind's already started going like, ooh, what could we do? Right. So I'm looking forward to creating that experience together. And yeah, man, thanks for taking your time and
Thank you
sharing
for
your heart.
having me.
Yeah, man.
I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And it's just been, your friendship has been so impactful for me in learning how to create and return to this space of compassionate curiosity. So
Yeah.
thank you, Bryan.
Amen. You're welcome. And thanks everybody for listening to our podcast today. And my invitation to everyone is, hey, if you know somebody that's like living in their head and their heart, that's living maybe more in their head than their heart, this might be a really good podcast to share with them and just say, hey, listen to Devin, a scientist and a professor, talk about his journey. So thanks for joining us today. We look forward to the next time we get together. Have a great day, everybody. All right.